Hey, it's Storyworthy. Today on the show, comedy writer and comedian Mike Drucker talks about his brand new memoir, Good Game, No Rematch, and talks about his crush in elementary school.
I then go, and they lived on the same block as me, but sort of like at the far end of the block. And so in this costume, in the Florida heat, I should add, so I'm wearing layers in the South Florida heat where I grew up. It was not around Halloween. I walked to their house, and by the way, I have looked in the mirror and I'm like, this is pretty good. Like, this is gonna work. Got there, rung the bell. This woman who looked exactly like my crush, but was an adult, answered, and I was kind of like, okay. And when she looked at me, there was such sad, like, pity. Like, I almost think that she thought, like, maybe I was, like, one of those kids that's been, like, locked in, like, a basement for 10 years and escapes and asks for food. Like, she was almost like, can I help you? I was like, yes, I would like to see your daughters.
Today on the show, late-night writer and author Mike Drucker talks about his new memoir, Good Game, No Rematch, A Life Made of Video Games, and talks about his crush in elementary school. Stay close.
Hi, it's Mike Drucker, and you're listening to Storyworthy.
Welcome to Storyworthy. My name is Christine Blackburn, and I'm coming to you from Los Angeles, California. Whether you're a longtime fan of the show of 15 years or you're a brand new listener, welcome to Storyworthy. Now, I hope you guys enjoyed the most recent guest I've had on, Rick Mitchell. Rick, of course, was a writer for Ellen DeGeneres for many, many years. And Rick put out a book with Carol Leifer. Yes, that's right. It's a book on how to write a good speech. Did you happen to see that, Mike?
No.
That book?
I haven't seen that.
Oh, yeah. It's really good. It's perfect for this time of year because, you know, it's how to write a speech, whether that be for graduation or a wedding or even a funeral. Anyway, it's very funny. And Rick Mitchell, do you know that guy?
I don't actually.
Oh, he's so bright and so interesting and actually reminds me a little bit of you because he's also a writer. Yes. So anyway, I hope you guys heard Rick Mitchell talking about, oh God, his story was so flippin' funny. He, ran for student council and failed basically, but it was just, crushing, but funny. And, anyway, this is great because today on the show, you guys, I have another late night television writer, an 8-time Emmy-nominated writer, in fact, an executive producer on Full Frontal with Samantha Bee, which I adore. Love, 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 Mike. I'm telling you. And also, you've written for lots of other stuff, which we'll talk about. But right now, I want to talk about your brand new memoir that's out called Good Game, No Rematch, A Life Made of Video Games. What a blast. This just came out yesterday, right, Mike?
Yep, just came out yesterday.
And maybe you can't tell by the title, but it is all about growing up with video games. And more so, wouldn't you say, about what that life is for a kid, and
definitely.
And why they really get hard into video games and what exactly they're escaping. And I think you and I actually might be somewhat of the same age. And at that time, it's a through line in your book about your father, and trying to get his attention and trying to, just have a relationship with him, something better. And, you escape in video games, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And, a lot of it's also just that, there's so many books about how, watching movies growing up changes you, or watching or listening to music changes you as a kid. And, there's so much negativity, both in toxic communities or in perceptions about games, that I wanted to write something that wasn't like, I didn't want to write something glossy that ignored the negatives, but I wanted to write something that was fun and sort of funny about, like, I grew up with video games and they really influenced the way I see the world. And sometimes that was for the better and sometimes it was for the worse. And so, I wanted to write something that, like, expressed that this is an art form that's really, like, changed the way we see certain things if you're a fan. And hopefully I did that.
Well, I think you did. I read the book. I loved it. And, you talk about video games. You start the book with, being the medium that lets you interact with art. I mean, essentially, that's what is happening, which is a really full sentence, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it gives you a space to belong and have power. So,
Absolutely.
right off the bat, I mean, this is a kid is in. And then you go right to Game Boy, a
Yeah.
Game Boy. That was a game changer,
Yeah.
to say the least. And you talk about your grandmas. Did they pitched in to get it for you?
Yeah, my well, no, it was both. It was my dad's parents.
Okay, just one set of grandparents.
Just set of grandparents. I
They
think
take you to a
yeah.
Chili's restaurant.
Yep. As they do for every birthday. Every birthday is at Chili's until they died. Like, and if you were like, oh, can we go to Fuddruckers? They'd be like, no, we're going to Chili's for your birthday.
What the hell are you talking about? Right. Olive Garden? No.
Never. We're not going to go to Red Lobster. We're going to Chili's.
Of course. It only makes sense. So because you had been hoping you're going to get this Game Boy. Can you just describe that little part of the book? Because it was really, I could just picture you.
Yeah. Well, I'll preface it by saying that my family, especially at this point, did not have a lot of money. And my parents were kind of struggling financially. And so a Game Boy wasn't necessarily like in the cards. But it was my birthday and I was having dinner with my grandparents at Chili's. And then they showed they were like, you can open this. And because my grandparents always got me like socks or like polo shirts that I was a giant kid. Like I was a very round little boy, and like polo shirts on a round little boy are the worst thing. It's the worst feeling. And so I was like, all right, they got me clothes. I'll pretend to be excited and we'll move on with the meal. And instead it was the Game Boy. It was like the thing I'd been fantasizing about for like a year. And I was so thrilled. And then they also got me a game for it. And I was like, that was Mario Land. Awesome. And it turned out to be golf because that's what my grandfather loves the most in the world.
Of course. That's sweet, though. I mean, that's sweet. You know? Yeah. And then what was the part about your grandfather playing golf with the mafia? Is that true?
That's true. We've actually confirmed it with more than one relative. So it's not just like a relative that's making up a story. Like relatives that don't even necessarily like my grandma's family that didn't always like, it's been confirmed. But essentially, my grandparents were very cool. They were like cool people in Iowa in like the 50s and 60s. And they would go to Vegas all the time. And they were like this jet setting couple I'm almost certain they were swingers. I've never been able to get this out of anybody, but I'm like, they sound like they definitely were swingers. But he was a great golfer and he was super fun and charming and like dressed well. And you're hanging out at this Vegas golf course and he made friends with these guys he started golfing with. And they were like, kind of New York guys. But in Vegas, you're like, okay, there's guys from New York who come here a lot. I'm from Iowa and come here a lot. And I'm not asking a lot of questions. And so they became a golf group or they lied to him. Yeah. And my grandpa was also very good at golf. So they liked having him because he would like up their scores when they played like team play or whatever. And so eventually one of the guys was like, hey, I'm having a lunch at my place. You should come over. My grandpa's like, great. And he got there and there was like guys with guns everywhere. and and eventually like it came out that they were like in the mob. And I don't know, like, I think my grandpa must have like been very careful with sort of like slowly getting away from that because they sort of like extricated themselves without dying. But it also sounds like it was kind of like very friendly and they really, really liked my grandfather. So it might have been that sort of like a.
Right. And they had the one common thing the thing in common was golf. I mean, I'm just saying because like I play tennis with people that I don't know anything about them. And if I see them not on the tennis court, I barely recognize them.
Yeah, exactly. And so my grandpa was accidentally friends with some mob bosses.
Okay, then in the book, you go through video game manuals, which is a really funny chapter. And you talk about all the different ways you could read the manuals.
Yeah.
There would be a disc, or there would be this, you say a 36-digit download code. And then the $100 box, everything else, it's just empty. There's nothing.
It's just empty. Yeah, well, that's honestly, there's a few chapters in the book that are almost like more like McSweeney's pieces. They're kind of like interstitially, put out. And for this one, growing up with games, I'm very lucky that I sort of grew up with like an early era of games and I still play them. So I've seen the evolution of them. But like the manuals in the 70s were like these thorough manuals to explain the simplest game. So it would be this long, winding story to explain why you're breaking bricks with a paddle. And then in the 80s, it became very like Reagan era. It became very like, listen up, soldier. You're going to be fitting these blocks together today. Or come on, maggot. Like it's very, you know what I mean? Like that Reagan macho.
Sure.
90s, though. 90s became, and this is like, I swear to God, if you read the boxes and manuals of those decades, you will start to see this pattern. And then in the 90s, everything was like tubular. Like everything was
you
like.
You say that word tubular. I laughed out loud. That's such a funny word.
Like everything's like, whoa! Like it's it's the era of commercials where you have like an old lady who'd point at the camera in a fisheye lens and be like, you can't stop it.
Right.
And so, but then once we got to the 2000s, you can tell these companies are caring less about these manuals, which is a common complaint. And by now, like in this, where we are now, we're at a point where like, it kind of is like an empty box that'll sometimes have a download code. Or like,
don't you say though something about in the 2000s about how tiny the font was?
Oh yeah,
nobody could read that.
No. Like if you look at like those manuals starting in 2000, especially the back, like that, it's all written in like size 2 font.
That's very funny. That's very, very funny. Okay, then later in the book, you talk about when video game. Oh, way back, you talk about how it influenced your bed sheets, your posters, the marketing of the games, right? And that really started with Mario, you're saying?
That started for me with Mario. I mean, for other people, it probably started with other stuff. But for me, it was Mario. And I also think, like, this sounds like a joke, but it's actually true. Like, as a little fat kid, seeing, like, a little fat guy on screen was kind of, like, nice. It kind of, like, was like, oh, this guy looks more like me than Superman does. And so it was sort of more of a hero that I felt like a close association with.
Right.
And so, yeah, no, I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with the world. It, like, I don't know why, but it sparked my like 3-year-old imagination so deeply. Like I really did. Like, it wasn't like I was lying to myself. I wasn't delusional, but it was sort of like I could imagine that world and I could imagine being in that world so vividly.
You were also obviously escaping, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Because you, and this is what I actually meant to say earlier. Like I said, you and I kind of grew up, I think, in the same era, the 70s, right? The 70s and early 80s. Yeah.
I'm mid 80s too.
Oh, yeah, me too. Mid 80s. Yeah, right. I roll. No, but listen, here's what I'm saying. Fathers back then wanted the boys to play baseball and football, team sports.
Yeah.
Like my brother I have 4 sisters and 1 brother. My brother wanted to run track. He did run track. He ran like cross country. But my dad was not having it. He wanted my brother to play football or whatever. So I felt like that was sort of what went on in your book. Your father also wanted you to, he wanted you to be into those things and you weren't.
Yeah. I mean, and it was almost like kind of sad because it wasn't as intense as that. Like, it wasn't like, my son must play football. It was a lot more like, he didn't care if I played it, I think, because he also wasn't super athletic. So it wasn't like, in my day, I was the quarterback. You better be the quarterback. Like, we never had that. But he really wanted me to like those things.
Yeah.
He would force me to go to games, which I know sounds like, well, you're going to a baseball game. How nice. When you're like a 5-year-old and your dad's screaming at you at the top of your lungs to get in the car and like, we're going to the game, it's less fun.
Well,
and
like nothing is fun when the bottom line is like an aggressive, mean person yelling at you all the time.
Yeah, and weirdly, it wasn't like, my son's a sissy, he doesn't like sports. It was a lot more like his feelings were hurt by it.
Yeah. Or
you know what I mean?
He didn't think you even understood or something, or maybe he really was trying to help you.
I think so. I mean, I think he was trying to help me kind of from like a narcissistic angle of being like, well, this helps me, so if you do it enough, I know it'll help you.
How about when you guys were at that baseball game together?
Yeah.
And they played a song and you identified it. And
yeah.
said, no, you're wrong. It's this. And you said, no, I'm pretty sure it's this from a video game, which kind of gave you credence because you play video games. And your dad's like, no, it's from a Checkers ad or something.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it was, so we were at, I think it was a Dolphins game, but for a while they played in the same stadium. So, and there was an ad for Checkers, but they had like an 8-bit chiptune type sound play with it. Very quick. It was, on the Jumbotron, it was like, Checkers kind of like, it wasn't like it was sort of like a screen like Checkers sponsors the Dolphins. Doodle-doodle-doodle. And I turned to my dad and I go, I think that's from Burger Time. Do you have a question for? Sorry,
no,
I see your finger
I don't.
over.
No, I'm listening. Sorry. No, I know. You said, I think it's from Burger Time. And then he turns to you and goes, no.
No, it's Checkers. And I was like, no, that is Burger Time. I know it. And what's crazy is when I got home, I didn't have it at home, but when I went to my friend's house, he had it. And I remember like the next day or the day after playing Burger Time, and I was like, I was right. This is the music from Burger Time. But like when he realized that I kind of knew what I was talking about, just seeing like the light drain from his eyes of being like, the only time at this football game this little boy has been excited was when he could identify a video game song in a burger restaurant ad.
Right. It's so adorable. Well, and that is part of the video games is, the jingles and stuff. And that does make you come back, because you get addicted to that little or whatever.
I mean, video game music was what I liked as a kid. I would hold a tape recorder up to the television and record things from games. When I was in middle school, I saved up a ton of money and you could like import Japanese game soundtracks. So I got like a money order and sent it to a company that then like I got like the Final Fantasy VII soundtrack like 2 months later. Wow. But it was so cool. It was so
glad
cool.
You got it.
Yeah. And I even as like a 6th grader when I did it, I was like, this must be a scam. But I really, really, really want this soundtrack.
Yeah, it's like the record club things, Yeah. It's like, there's got to be 13 CDs for a penny. What? Okay, I want to mention one more thing about the book, and we're going to go over to your story because I don't know if I mentioned you guys, but today Mike brings to the table impossible. Hold on one second. Brings to the table. Oh, shit, impossible crushes. Wait, no, I'm sorry. Can you say it? I'll edit.
Just go into the story.
No. I'm so sorry. What were we going to call it again? Impossible crushes? No.
Yeah, we could call it, or we could call it like unimpressed crushes.
Or just crushes in elementary school?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just going to repeat that. Yeah, guys, you guys, I forgot to even tell you what Mike brought to the table today, but his topic is crushes in elementary school. And we've all had them. So I'm looking forward to hearing that story in just a second. But one more thing about the book. You have a chapter about when accessories became a thing.
Yeah, peripherals. Yeah, things like the Power Glove and like different little like toys where you boxed over them to fight in a game.
And the robot.
Yeah, Rob the Robot. Rob the Robot. Robotic Operating Buddy. ROB, Robotic Operating.
Robotic Operating Buddy. So funny. Oh my God, that made me laugh so hard. And what about Duck Hunt?
Duck Hunt was, when I first got a Nintendo, I thought Duck Hunt was the game I'd like because I was 3. And so I was like, well, I'm not going to like this game with like jumping on things. That looks complicated. But as a little boy, I can understand shooting at something, which isn't necessarily a sign of a healthy culture, but that's for another day. And so I like started playing Duck Hunt, but I was bad at it because, again, I was a little kid. I didn't even know how to hold a plastic gun. Yeah. And I eventually just started like holding it up to the television, which probably looked disturbing to my parents. Like just seeing like a small child holding a gun right at a screen. But it was the only way I could do well.
That is so darn funny. Yeah. Was it like one of the light guns or the like a zapper?
Light gun.
Yeah.
Yeah,
oh
zapper.
My God, you were so little. You even named the first chapter "Your Sad Electric Son."
Yeah,
I was a very title right there.
I was a cry-heavy kid. I was ready to cry at the drop of a hat as a kid. I was not an emotionally stable boy.
Oh, isn't that something? I'm telling. And how many brothers and sisters?
I have one younger brother and one older sister.
Interesting. You're right there in the middle.
Yep.
All right. Well, let's get over to your story in just a second, but I wanted to remind you guys that Story Smash, the storytelling game show, is going strong here in Los Angeles. And we're playing this Saturday night, April 5th, with Danny Zucker, Wendy McClendon-Covey, and Blanca Patch. So come on down to the Lyric Hyperion. Go to storysmashshow.com for more information. Holy cow, it's a lot of fun. Mike, you would love my game, Story Smash.
I would love it, yeah. I would love it.
Super fun. People, comedians come up, spin a wheel, tell a true 1-minute story on whatever they land on. And then we go to the judges and they critique it. So I say, come for the stories, stay for the criticism.
Yeah.
It's super fun. And of course, you guys can always check out storyworthypodcast.com as well. All right, you guys, Mike Drucker, you hear him talking. He was the co-head writer on Full Frontal with Samantha Bee, and he's written for The Tonight Show, the Late Night with Jimmy Fallon, the ESPYs hosted by Seth Meyers, Bill Nye Saves the World, and Adams Ruins Everything. You guys can find him over on Substack. I don't know if you guys look into Substack. I love that. I love that publication. And you are also on Blue Sky, which is lovely, Mike Drucker. And here's something I found interesting. Mike, you give out your Gmail right there on the interweb.
Yeah, I mean, that's like, I wouldn't say that's the email I use for bank accounts. That's more like I wanted to create an email for both people who to contact me if they're interested in work, and giving me a job. I also made it though because I knew that sometimes because I get a little political online or I make fun of toxic people in the games industry, sometimes I will get very angry responses. So I was like, you know what? I will create a front-facing email that both is for my career in terms of work, but also for any crazies. And that way they're not doing a deep dive to find it. Whether or not that strategy has even worked, I don't know. But that is the account I get the death threats.
Wow. Oh, shit. Well, it's a catchy account. Mike Drucker is dead.
Yeah, it makes sense that you'd send a threat to that. Or that he's already dead, so why would you?
You are so darn funny. Anyway, you guys, I'm so happy he's here. Put your hands together wherever you are for Mike Drucker.
Yeah, clap for me. So I was always, I think, a romantic kid. I have had crushes as long as I can remember. I'm bi, but I'd say as a kid, I would mostly crushes on girls. I think I probably had crushes on boys, but there was more I really want to be your friend. I didn't process it as well because I hadn't been demonstrated anything. But I really had all these crushes on girls. And my first, what I would call relationship, because we did kiss, was in kindergarten when I dated a first grader. So there you go. Named,
experienced.
With the oldest first grader named Diane.
Was she 9?
I don't even know. Probably I was probably I might have been 6. She might have been 7. But she was into games. Her family had a little more money than ours, so she also had a lot of them. And I was just so into her. And we kind of, I don't think we called it dating, but I had a different best friend, but we hung out more than I hung out with my best friend. And I definitely felt about her different than I felt about my best friend. And she seemed to feel about me differently than she felt about her friends. And, it was, it's young love, which is very sweet. It's puppy love. And unfortunately, her parents got a job, or forget if it's her mom or her dad, got a job somewhere else. And so she had to move. And so to keep this relationship alive, my childhood brain first thought, okay, I'm just going to take down the yard sign, the for sale sign. Because, as a kid, you're like, well, if you take down the sign that says the house is for sale, they can't sell it. Therefore, they'll never move.
Yeah.
And that did not work.
A Brady Bunch episode.
Yeah. But that actually doesn't work. So they moved, and she actually gave me a copy of Ice Hockey for the NES as her going away gift. And I still own that. It was very sweet. But so after that happened, I was kind of feeling lonely, and I still felt crushes. I was still very romantic, and I started to get a crush on one of the girls in this group of twins, whose name I changed for the book because the publisher asked me to. Don't worry, nothing happened to them. That was just So I'm going to avoid their names just because the publisher made me change their names. So I'm not going to like go off script
Yeah,
here.
no, it's too much.
But so I had a crush on one of them, I think, because she was like, might have been nice to me once, and then I became crazy. Mm-hmm. And so, I really liked her. I really wanted to impress her, and I didn't know how. I hadn't figured out what I was good at yet. I wasn't that funny yet. I wasn't really like the smart kid quite yet. I definitely had a messy, like I was dressing in like cotton shorts and big Tasmanian devil shirts. Like I was not impressive. But this was around the time that Super Mario 3 came out, and it was a very big deal to me. Super Mario 3 was so important. And if you remember, or if you don't remember, there were commercials of children screaming Mario as the camera pulled out and revealed Mario's face on the earth. And there was a movie called The Wizard with Fred Savage, where he plays Super Mario 3 at this giant tournament that like is the dream of any child like me. Yeah. And so when it came out, and it's also a great game. Yeah. So when it came out, like that was my whole life. There was actually a new Saturday morning cartoon that was a Super Mario 3 cartoon that was different than the old Super Mario Super Show. And I was so into it that I was like, okay, well, me and Diane, we liked video games. So I will impress this crush, who is, by the way, a twin, but I only had a crush on one, by dressing up as Mario. Now, I was probably, again, at this point, I was probably 7 maybe. And I just found things around the house. I didn't ask anyone for help. I will say that. I did not ask anyone for help because even then I was a little embarrassed. Like, it wasn't like I didn't think it would work, but I was like, you don't involve your mom and dad because they're going to be weird about it. And so I I found like a red hat that was like some red baseball team hat. I got like overalls that I kind of stole from my either my dad or maybe my sister or something. And I wore a mustache. I wore a piece of my dad's sock. I cut my dad's sock up. I do not know if I got in trouble for that, but I guarantee I did.
It's a big sock.
Yeah.
Or a big mustache.
Big mustache, like out of a cut sock that looked so wrong. Just looked like...
Right. Hey.
And like, I think I either taped it to my face or glued it to my face, I think. Like Elmer's glue. Oh. Elmer's glue is not that bad. And then because Mario and Mario 3 has a raccoon suit, I made myself a raccoon tail out of cardboard. And I will say it probably looked more like a Pikachu tail. It was not a very good tail. And I like duct taped it to my butt because that's where a tail is. And so I was wearing a makeshift, made by a child, Mario costume with a long piece of cardboard taped to my butt. And that I, drew on with a marker to make it look like a tail, which made it even less like a tail. Right. And so I then go, and they lived on the same block as me, but sort of like at the far end of the block. And so in this costume, in the Florida heat, I should add, so I'm wearing layers in the South Florida heat where I grew up. It was not around Halloween. And I walked to their house. And by the way, I have looked in the mirror and I'm like, this is pretty good. No. Like, this is going to work.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, I grew up in one of those neighborhoods that had a lot of, it wasn't like now where they're exactly the same, but there was like a lot of ranch style houses that'd be like orange, then yellow, then red, but similar enough where I was a little worried. Mm-hmm. And there was enough people in Florida who are mad when you ring their bell and don't need anything that I was kind of worried. But I got there, rung the bell. This woman who looked exactly like my crush, but was an adult, answered. And I was kind of like, okay, I'm probably here. And when she looked at me, there was such sad, like, pity. Like, I almost think that she thought, like, maybe I was, like, one of those kids that's been, like, locked in, like, a basement for 10 years and escapes and asks for food. Like, she was almost like, can I help you? I was like, yes, I would like to see your daughters. I said their names. I didn't say your daughters. That would have been horrifying. And I said, I'd like to see your daughters. And she was like, oh, do you know them? And I was like, yeah, we're friends, which is a stretch. We went to school together. And so they come out and they recognize me from school, and they're like, kind of, the way a normal person would, being like, okay, what can we do for you? Like, what would you like from this interaction? Right. And I was like, I'm dressed as Mario. And they were like, okay. Oh, no, I didn't even say I was dressed as Mario. I kind of like waited for them to recognize it. And then one of them was kind of like, oh, yeah, Mario from the games. Yeah, the video game Mario. She had never played it. She had just heard of it. She'd seen the art of it. And And sort of like the disappointment on their faces, or sort of, because they had a similar look to their mom, like sort of like we don't understand what's going on here. We know this boy must be in distress or something. And they weren't rude. Like they were kind of like, it was almost like they were like, well, okay, goodbye. And then they went back into their place. And then I spent like the rest of the day and maybe even a week just like thinking about that. And being like, did I, and like not, and the thing was, it wasn't even like I screwed it up. It was more like in my head, I was like, did we do that right? Like, did that go well? Like, imagine a dumb man on a date and then imagine a very dumb boy. Like, so even dumber. Just being like, did that go well? Did it go well? It did not go well. They never talked to me in class again.
Oh my gosh.
They weren't rude, but they avoided me.
Were they identical?
Absolutely identical. One of them had a slightly deeper voice than the other, and she was one I had a crush on. But like the only way you could probably tell them apart was one had a slightly different,
it was almost like double the pain.
Yeah.
Because you're seeing.
I'm seeing double.
Oh.
I'm seeing double. And they were, I mean, when I say they didn't talk to me again, it wasn't like they refused to, but it was clear that they, weren't jumping in when we were doing group activities with my group. Like,
sure.
They kept me at a safe distance.
How long do you think you kept that costume on that day?
God, it must have been 4 or 5 hours.
But do you think you took it off like you were mad that you did it, or?
No, I think I took it off almost like you'd take off a suit after a job interview, where you're like, okay, I didn't get a feel on how that went, but I'm going to like put this jacket away, because it wasn't so bad that it's like, I'm done with it. But you're like, well, they didn't offer me a job on the spot. So do I wait for a call? Like, it was sort of that feeling, I think.
That is adorable. Hey, what did you study in college?
I studied English literature and journalism. Then I got a master's in English lit.
Oh, wow. So you are well read.
Yeah. I mean, kind of. I mean,
but there was nothing in gaming that would have attracted you, in terms of, making games and writing for games.
I mean, I worked for Nintendo for a short time doing writing work.
That's true. That's in the book.
But I think comedy is just so much fun for me that it was hard to. Nintendo didn't want me to stop doing comedy, but it wouldn't be my full career. Writing would have been, which is great, but when you're at Nintendo, they expect you to work at Nintendo, so it's not like I can disappear for 5 days to do the road or, focus on something else. So I eventually left. I love the company, by the way. I left the company liking it more than I came in, so that says something.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But I still freelance for games occasionally or write jokes for them. It's just, I like comedy, and there's more comedy work available in every other form. There's more comedy in games over time. It's been growing, but that's why I've focused more on like TV and books, and the internet is just, I felt like I'm better at it a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Well, it seems like you've definitely found your niche, for sure.
Thank you. I've tried to.
I'm not kidding, man.
Or fallen into my niche.
You guys, it's hot off the press. The name of the memoir is Good Game, No Rematch, A Life Made of Video Games. You're going to love it. Find it anywhere you buy your books. And if it's an independent bookstore, get it there, would you? Yep. Thank you. I work for Skylight Books here in Los Angeles, so I'm always pitching them.
I mean, it makes sense to me.
Yeah. Listen, this was so much fun to talk to you, Mike. You're so interesting. And, like my past guests, Rick Mitchell and a lot of other smart writers I know, very interesting to talk to. I really enjoy listening to your story, and your resume is just so impressive. And I love the book.
Thank you very much for reading it. I appreciate that.
Yeah, this was fun. Don't forget, you guys, you can email him at MikeDruckersDead@gmail.com.
Yep,
I'm sorry,
right.
I just find that very funny. I find that. And I did follow you over on Blue Sky, so I'll see you there as well at Mike Drucker. All right, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in to Storyworthy. I sure appreciate it. On behalf of the very talented Mike Drucker, again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
My name is Christine Blackburn, saying, make it a storyworthy week.